I never thought a piece of rusted metal and some wooden planks would become the most powerful weapon in my arsenal against the Brookfield Estates Homeowners Association. But here we are. My name is Quincy Garrison, and I have lived in rural Vermont for the better part of 40 years. I am a contractor by trade, the kind of man who knows his way around heavy machinery, building codes, and small-town politics. I own a modest 2-story farmhouse on 15 acres at the end of Millstone Road, a private road that winds through dense forest and crosses an old wooden bridge before reaching the cluster of newer homes that make up Brookfield Estates. The thing is, I own my property long before those cookie-cutter McMansions ever existed, and more importantly, I own that bridge. It was my grandfather who built the bridge back in 1962, connecting our family land to the main county highway. The deed is crystal clear. The bridge sits entirely on my property, maintained by me, paid for by me. When the developer bought the land beyond my property in 2018 and carved out Brookfield Estates, they needed access across my bridge to reach their fancy development. My lawyer at the time, good old Jim Henderson, advised me to charge them for an easement, but I was feeling generous. I granted them access for free, thinking neighbors should help neighbors. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was not anticipating that Sharon Newman would move into the largest house in Brookfield Estates and immediately appoint herself president of the newly formed HOA. Sharon was exactly what you would picture when someone says the word Karen in that particular tone of voice. Blonde highlights, those chunky statement necklaces, an SUV bigger than some studio apartments, and an attitude that suggested the world owed her something simply for existing. The trouble started in December 2024, right after the first major snowstorm of the season. Vermont winters are no joke. We regularly get 2-3 feet of snow in a single storm, and Millstone Road is not maintained by the town. It is a private road, which means if you want it plowed, you either do it yourself or you hire someone. For years, I had been plowing not just my own driveway, but the entire length of Millstone Road and the bridge with my old Ford pickup and a heavy-duty snowplow attachment. I did this as a courtesy because, again, I believed in being neighborly. The morning after that first storm, I was up at 5 in the morning, coffee in my thermos, climbing into my truck. The snowplow was already attached, a beast of steel and hydraulics that I had maintained meticulously over the years. I fired up the engine and started the familiar route, pushing massive walls of snow to either side of the narrow road. The work was meditative in its own way, the scrape of metal on asphalt, the white powder flying in the headlights. I had just finished clearing the bridge and was working my way toward the Brookfield Estates entrance when I saw Sharon's massive SUV blocking the road. She was standing outside in a puffy white coat that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, waving her arms like she was directing air traffic. I rolled down my window. "Morning, Sharon. You are going to want to move your vehicle so I can finish up here." "Quincy, we need to talk," she said, her breath misting in the cold air. "The HOA board had an emergency meeting last night." "An emergency meeting about snow?" I asked, genuinely confused. "An emergency meeting about your snowplow," she corrected, clutching a folder to her chest. "We have received complaints about noise ordinances, and there are concerns about the condition of your equipment." I glanced at my truck. Sure, it was old. A 1998 Ford F-250, to be exact, but it ran like a dream and the plow was solid. "Sharon, it is 5:30 in the morning. After a storm like last night, this is when plowing happens. If I wait until 8 or 9, everyone is trapped." That may be true, but the HOA bylaws clearly state that no commercial-grade equipment can be operated on the private road before 7 in the morning on weekdays and 8 on weekends. She pulled a piece of paper from her folder and held it up like it was the Constitution itself. "Your HOA bylaws do not apply to me," I said slowly, trying to keep my irritation in check. "I am not part of Brookfield Estates. My property predates your development by decades." "The road is shared property," Sharon insisted. "No, it is not. The road crosses my land, and the bridge is entirely on my property. I plow it as a courtesy." Her expression hardened. "Regardless, we need you to comply with community standards. Also, the board has decided that your snowplow is an eyesore and presents a safety hazard. We are requesting that you cease using it on Millstone Road effective immediately." I sat there in my truck, heater blasting, staring at this woman who had lived in the neighborhood for all of 6 months and was now trying to tell me what I could and could not do on my own property. "You want me to stop plowing the road? We want you to stop using that particular truck and plow. The HOA will be hiring a professional service to maintain the road going forward." "And who is going to pay for that?" I asked. "The cost will be distributed among HOA members," she said. "But we expect all residents who use the road to contribute. We will be sending you an invoice." I laughed. I could not help it. "Sharon, you cannot invoice me for a service I did not request on my own property. That is not how any of this works." "We will see about that," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. "In the meantime, You are hereby notified that your snowplow is banned from Millstone Road. If you continue to use it, the HOA will pursue legal action." She walked back to her SUV and drove off, leaving me sitting there in the pre-dawn darkness with half the road still covered in snow. I finished the job that morning. I was not going to let the road stay impassable just because Sharon Newman had delusions of authority. But as I was clearing the last stretch, I started thinking about that bridge. The bridge I owned. The bridge that was the only way to reach Brookfield Estates from the county highway. When I got home, I dug out the property deed and survey maps. I spread them across my kitchen table and traced the boundaries with my finger. Sure enough, the bridge was entirely on my land. The road leading up to it was partly on my property and partly on an easement I had granted the developer. But that easement was for access, not for dictating what I could or could not do on my own land. I called Jim Henderson that afternoon. Jim was semi-retired but still kept his hand in real estate law. I explained the situation, and I could hear him chuckling on the other end of the line. "Quincy, you are in the right here," Jim said. "That HOA has no authority over you or your property. The easement you granted is for access. Period. They cannot tell you when or how to plow. What about this invoice they are threatening? Garbage. They cannot bill you for a service you did not agree to. If they want to hire their own plow service, that is their business, but they cannot make you pay for it. And if they try to take legal action, let them. They will lose." "But Quincy, here is the thing. You have more leverage than you think. That bridge is yours. You have been allowing them free access out of goodwill. But if they are going to make your life difficult, you are within your rights to restrict access." That conversation planted a seed. I was not naturally vindictive, but I also was not going to be pushed around by an HOA that had no jurisdiction over me. The invoice arrived 2 days later. Sharon herself delivered it, along with a printed copy of the violation notice regarding my snowplow. The invoice was for $300, my share of the professional plowing service they had hired. I invited her into my living room, mostly because it was below freezing outside and I was not a complete jerk. She perched on the edge of my couch like she was afraid of catching something. "Sharon, I am not paying this," I said, handing the invoice back to her. "Then the HOA will place a lien on your property," she said. "No, you will not. You have no legal basis. I have spoken with my attorney, and he assures me that your HOA has zero authority over me or my property." She bristled. "You are still using the private road. You benefit from the plowing service. I have been plowing that road myself for years. For free. If anything, you should be thanking me. Your truck is too loud, and frankly, Quincy, it is embarrassing. When guests visit Brookfield Estates, the first thing they see is your beat-up old truck and that rusty plow. It does not reflect the community standards we are trying to maintain." I felt my jaw tighten. "Let me make something very clear. I am not part of your community. I was here long before you, and I will be here long after you move on to whatever next thing catches your fancy. You do not get to dictate what I drive or when I plow." "We will see what a judge has to say about that," she said, standing up. "You do that," I replied, opening the door for her. "And while you are at it, you might want to have your lawyer look into who actually owns the bridge your entire neighborhood depends on." That stopped her. For just a second I saw uncertainty flicker across her face, but then the mask of superiority slid back into place. "Are you threatening to block access?" "I am informing you of the facts. That bridge is my property. I have been generous in allowing access. But generosity is a two-way street, Sharon." She left without another word, her heels clicking sharply on my porch steps. That evening, I got a call from another Brookfield resident, a guy named Tom Patterson who lived in one of the smaller homes near the back of the development. Tom was a decent guy, a teacher at the local high school. We had chatted a few times at the general store in town. "Quincy, hey, it is Tom Patterson from Brookfield. Listen, I heard about the thing with Sharon and the snowplow. Word travels fast," I said. "She sent an email to the whole HOA about it. I just wanted to say, for what it is worth, most of us think this is ridiculous. You have been doing us a huge favor for years. Sharon is just on a power trip." "I appreciate that, Tom. Is it true you own the bridge?" "It is, built by my grandfather entirely on my property." Tom was quiet for a moment. "So technically you could restrict access?" "Technically, yes. But I am not looking to make life hard for everyone just because Sharon is being unreasonable. I get that. I just wanted you to know that not all of us are behind this. Some of us tried to vote against the whole snowplow ban thing, but Sharon pushed it through with her little clique." That call made me feel a bit better, but it also underscored the problem. Sharon had consolidated power within the HOA, surrounding herself with people who either agreed with her or were too intimidated to push back. The next storm hit 3 days later. This time I did not plow. I woke up at my usual time, looked out the window at the 18 inches of fresh snow, and made myself a cup of coffee. My truck sat in the garage, plow still attached, ready to go, but I left it there. By 8 in the morning, my phone started ringing. The first call was from a woman named Barbara Mitchell, one of Sharon's cronies on the HOA board. "Quincy, the road has not been plowed," she said, as if I might not have noticed. "That is correct," I replied. "Well, when are you planning to do it?" "I am not." There was a pause. "What do you mean you are not?" "Your HOA president banned my snowplow from the road, so I am complying with her directive, but we need the road cleared." "Then you should call the professional service Sharon hired." "I will," she huffed and hung up. 15 minutes later, Tom Patterson called. "Quincy, did you hear? The plow service Sharon hired is not coming." "Why not?" "Apparently they only service the development itself, not the access road. Sharon thought the road was public and that the town maintained it. When she found out it is private, the company said it is not covered under the contract." I could not help but smile. "That is unfortunate, Quincy, come on. Some of us have to get to work." "Tom, I sympathize, I really do. But your HOA president made it clear that my equipment is not welcome on that road. My hands are tied." He sighed. "This is going to be a mess." It was a mess. By noon there were a dozen cars trapped in Brookfield Estates. People who had tried to leave for work found themselves stuck halfway down Millstone Road. A few attempted to drive through the deep snow and ended up in ditches. I heard the sound of tow trucks struggling to navigate the unplowed road. Sharon showed up at my door around 2 in the afternoon. Her face was red, whether from anger or cold I could not tell. "You did this on purpose," she spat. "I did exactly what you asked," I said calmly. "You banned my snowplow. I am complying. You know that is not what I meant." "Then perhaps you should have been more precise in your demands. People cannot get to work. There was a medical emergency, and the ambulance could barely make it through." That last part did concern me. "Is everyone okay?" "Yes, but no thanks to you," she snapped. "You are being petty and childish, Sharon. I am going to explain this one more time. I do not work for you. I do not answer to your HOA. For years, I have been plowing that road out of the goodness of my heart. You decided my truck was not up to your standards and banned it. Fine, but you do not get to have it both ways. We will find another solution," she said. "Good luck with that." She stormed off, and I watched her struggle through the snow back to her SUV. Part of me felt bad. I genuinely did not want to make life hard for people like Tom, who had been nothing but decent, but I also was not going to be bullied into submissions by an HOA that had no legal standing over me. Over the next week, things got worse for Brookfield Estates. The plow service Sharon had hired refused to extend their contract to cover Millstone Road. It was too narrow, too remote, and the bridge made them nervous. They were worried about liability if something happened. Sharon tried to hire other companies, but it was the middle of winter in Vermont. Every reputable service was already booked solid. The few that had availability quoted her outrageous prices because they knew she was desperate. Meanwhile, I continued my normal routine. I plowed my own driveway and the section of Millstone Road that led directly to my property. But I stopped at the boundary line. The rest of the road, including the bridge, remained buried under snow. The residents of Brookfield Estates started parking their cars on the far side of the bridge and walking across to retrieve them. It was inconvenient and people were understandably frustrated. I started getting nasty looks whenever I went into town, and someone left an anonymous note on my windshield calling me a selfish jerk. But I also got a few quiet words of support. Tom Patterson stopped by with a six-pack of beer and apologized for the whole situation. An older couple, the Hendersons, who lived in one of the original houses near mine, told me they thought Sharon had overstepped and that I was right to stand my ground. Then, in mid-January, things escalated. I came home one afternoon to find a truck parked near the bridge. 2 men were unloading equipment and Sharon was standing nearby, directing them. I walked over. "What is going on here?" I asked. "We are clearing the bridge," Sharon said. "With whose permission?" "It is a private road. We have the right to maintain it." "The bridge is on my property," I said, raising my voice. "You do not have permission to bring equipment onto my land." One of the workers, a burly guy in a Carhartt jacket, looked between us. "Lady, is this your property or not?" "It is a shared access road," Sharon said quickly. "It is not," I countered. "This bridge is entirely on my land. I own it, I maintain it, and you are trespassing." The worker held up his hands. "We are not getting in the middle of this. We need written proof of ownership and permission before we do any work." He and his partner packed up their equipment and left. Sharon turned on me. Her face twisted with fury. "You are going to regret this, Quincy. Is that a threat?" "It is a promise. The HOA board is meeting tonight and we are going to pursue every legal avenue available to force you to comply." "Go ahead," I said. "But in the meantime, get off my property." She left, but I had a bad feeling about the whole encounter. That evening, I called Jim Henderson again and explained what had happened. "Quincy, you need to post no trespassing signs and make it crystal clear that the bridge is private property," Jim advised. "If they bring equipment onto your land again without permission, you can call the sheriff." I spent the next morning putting up signs. Big, official-looking signs that read "Private property, no trespassing, bridge owned and maintained by Quincy Garrison." I posted them at both ends of the bridge and along the section of Millstone Road that crossed my land. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from a law firm in Montpelier. The Brookfield Estates HOA was suing me for denying access and creating a public nuisance. The letter demanded that I immediately resume plowing the road and bridge or face financial penalties. I forwarded the letter to Jim, who called me back within an hour. "This is garbage, Quincy. They do not have a case. You granted an easement for access, not for maintenance, and you are not denying access. People can walk across the bridge or shovel it themselves if they want. You are just not doing the work for them anymore. So what do I do?" We respond with our own letter, making it clear that they have no standing, and if they push this, we countersue for harassment. Jim drafted a response that was polite but firm. He outlined the property boundaries, referenced the original easement agreement, and made it clear that the HOA had no authority to dictate my actions on my own land. He also pointed out that I had been providing a free service for years, and that the HOA's decision to ban my equipment had created their current predicament. While all this legal back and forth was happening, the residents of Brookfield Estates were growing increasingly desperate. Another major storm hit in late January, dumping 2 feet of snow. The bridge became impassable. People were literally trapped in their homes unless they were willing to hike through waist-deep snow. Tom Patterson called me, sounding exhausted. "Quincy, I know you are standing on principle here and I respect that, but is there any way we can work something out? Maybe the HOA could pay you to plow." "Tom, they would have to retract the ban on my equipment and issue a formal apology," I said. "And even then, I am not sure I want to work with people who have threatened to sue me." "I understand. For what it is worth, there is a growing faction of homeowners who want Sharon removed as HOA president. She has been completely unreasonable about this whole thing." That was interesting. "How big of a faction?" "Big enough. We are pushing for a special election. But these things take time, and in the meantime we are stuck." I felt for Tom, I really did, but I also was not going to cave just because things were inconvenient. Then something happened that changed the entire dynamic. It was early February, another brutally cold morning. I was in my workshop repairing a broken table leg when I heard shouting. I stepped outside and saw smoke rising from the direction of Brookfield Estates. My first thought was a house fire, but as I walked closer to the bridge, I realized it was a car. Someone had tried to drive across the snow-covered bridge, lost control, and crashed through the wooden railing. The vehicle was partially submerged in the frozen creek below, and I could hear someone screaming. I ran back to my house, grabbed my phone, and called 911. Then I grabbed a rope and a heavy coat and sprinted toward the bridge. By the time I got there, a small crowd had gathered on the far side. They were yelling instructions, but no one was actually doing anything. I recognized the car. It was a small sedan belonging to a young woman named Emily Carter who had just moved into Brookfield a few months ago. I could see her in the driver's seat, struggling with the door. "Is anyone calling for help?" I shouted. "Ambulance is on the way," someone yelled back. The car shifted, sinking a few more inches. The ice around it was cracking. I did not think. I just moved. I tied one end of the rope around a sturdy tree near the bridge and looped the other end around my waist. Then I climbed down the embankment, testing each step. The ice groaned under my weight. "Emily, can you hear me?" I called. "The door is stuck." Her voice was panicked, and I could see water starting to seep into the car. I reached the vehicle and tried the door. It was jammed. I grabbed a rock and smashed the window, then reached in and unlocked it from the inside. The door opened with a screech of metal. "Come on, give me your hand," I said. She grabbed onto me and I pulled her out. The car lurched, tilting further into the water. We scrambled up the embankment just as the vehicle slid completely into the creek with a sickening crash. Emily was shaking, sobbing. I wrapped my coat around her. "You are okay. You are safe." The ambulance arrived 15 minutes later. The paramedics checked her over and determined she was mostly fine, just shaken and bruised. The fire department came too, along with the sheriff's deputy. The deputy, a guy named Mark Callahan who I had known for years, took statements from everyone. When he got to me, he looked at the bridge and shook his head. "Quincy, this bridge is a hazard. It needs to be repaired or shut down." "I know," I said. "It is old and the railings are not what they used to be. But I have not had the funds to replace it." "Well, it needs to happen soon. If someone had died here today, there would be liability issues." Sharon, who had arrived on the scene, seized on that. "Officer, this bridge is a public safety hazard. The owner has been neglecting it and now someone nearly died." Mark gave her a flat look. "Madam, this is private property. The owner is not required to maintain it to any particular standard unless he is charging for access. Which, according to what I understand, he is not. But we use it to access our homes. That is between you and the property owner. If you do not feel the bridge is safe, you are free to find an alternate route or negotiate with Mr. Garrison to make improvements." Sharon looked like she wanted to argue, but Mark was already walking back to his patrol car. That incident was the turning point. Emily Carter, once she had recovered from the shock, actually came to my house a few days later to thank me. "Mr. Garrison, I owe you my life," she said, her eyes still red from crying. "If you had not been there, I do not know what would have happened." "I am just glad you are okay," I said. "But Emily, you should know that bridge is not safe. The railings are old, and with all the snow and ice, it is even more dangerous." "I know. I was being stupid. I thought I could make it across, and I lost control. It is not just your fault. The bridge should be better maintained. But that costs money, and it is not something I can afford right now." She nodded. "For what it is worth, a lot of us in Brookfield are really angry at Sharon. This whole thing with the snowplow is ridiculous. You have been helping us for years, and she drove you away." That sentiment was echoed by more and more residents. A petition started circulating to remove Sharon as HOA president. The special election Tom had mentioned was scheduled for late February. In the meantime, I got a call from Jim Henderson with interesting news. Quincy, the HOA's lawsuit is falling apart. Their lawyer did some basic research and realized they have no standing. They are trying to negotiate a settlement. What kind of settlement? They want to drop the lawsuit in exchange for you agreeing to let them hire someone to maintain the bridge. At whose expense? Theirs. They would pay for repairs and ongoing maintenance. You would retain ownership, but they would handle the upkeep. I thought about it. It was not a bad offer, but I still had reservations. What about the snowplow ban? They are willing to rescind it. The invoice they sent me? "I want a written apology from Sharon Newman," I said. Jim chuckled. "I will see what I can do." The negotiations took another week, but eventually, the HOA board agreed to all my terms. Sharon was forced to sign a letter apologizing for the misunderstanding and acknowledging that she had overstepped her authority. It was not exactly a heartfelt mea culpa, but it was something. The special election happened on the last Saturday of February. Sharon lost in a landslide. The new HOA president was a retired engineer named David Foster, who had been vocally critical of Sharon's handling of the snowplow situation. One of David's first acts was to reach out to me directly. We met at the local diner, and he laid out a proposal. "Quincy, I want to make things right. The previous board acted like idiots, and you got the short end of the stick. Here is what I am proposing. The HOA will pay for a full rebuild of the bridge, including modern railings and a reinforced structure. We will also pay you a monthly stipend to plow Millstone Road during the winter. You keep full ownership of the bridge and the road, and we sign a formal agreement that respects your property rights." "What is the catch?" I asked. "No catch. We need that bridge, and we need someone reliable to maintain the road. You have been doing it for years, and you do a good job. We should have been paying you all along." I agreed. The contract was drawn up by Jim Henderson, reviewed by both parties, and signed in March. The HOA paid for a complete rebuild of the bridge, which was finished by early May. It was a beautiful structure, sturdy and safe, with railings that could withstand a vehicle impact. That next winter, I resumed plowing Millstone Road, but this time I was being compensated fairly. The monthly stipend covered my fuel, equipment maintenance, and my time. It was a win-win. As for Sharon Newman, she left Brookfield Estates in the spring. Rumor had it she could not handle the social fallout from her disastrous tenure as HOA president. She sold her house and moved to Connecticut. No one was sorry to see her go, but the story does not quite end there. In June, I received a letter from the Vermont Attorney General's office. It was regarding Sharon Newman and the Brookfield Estates HOA. Apparently, during an audit of the HOA's finances, discrepancies had been discovered. Significant amounts of money had been transferred out of the HOA's operating account into a personal account controlled by Sharon. The letter asked if I would be willing to provide testimony regarding the invoice I had been sent and the attempt to charge me for services I had not requested. I agreed. The investigation revealed that Sharon had been embezzling HOA funds for months. The invoice she had sent me was part of a larger scheme where she had been billing residents for services that were either inflated in cost or never actually performed. She had pocketed thousands of dollars. The case went to trial in September. I testified about the fraudulent invoice and the attempt to charge me for the plowing service. Other residents testified about similar experiences. Sharon's defense was weak, and the evidence was overwhelming. She was found guilty of embezzlement and fraud. The judge sentenced her to 3 years in prison and ordered her to pay restitution to the HOA and the affected residents. Sitting in that courtroom, watching Sharon being led away in handcuffs, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Satisfaction, certainly, but also sadness. This whole mess could have been avoided if she had just been reasonable. If she had treated people with respect instead of trying to control everything and everyone around her. After the trial, David Foster and I stood outside the courthouse. He shook my head. "Thank you for standing your ground, Quincy. If you had not pushed back, we might never have looked closely at what Sharon was doing." I was just defending my property, I said. But I am glad the truth came out. That bridge you own saved Emily Carter's life, and in a way it saved all of us from Sharon's schemes. Funny how things work out. It was funny in a way. A piece of rusted metal and some wooden planks, a snowplow and an old bridge, had become the catalyst for exposing corruption and bringing a community together. As I drove home that day, passing over the newly rebuilt bridge, I thought about my grandfather. He had built that bridge with his own hands, never imagining the role it would play decades later. He had believed in hard work, integrity, and standing up for what was right. I like to think he would have been proud. The years that followed were peaceful. I continued plowing Millstone Road each winter, and the residents of Brookfield Estates became genuinely good neighbors. We had summer barbecues, helped each other with projects, and looked out for one another. Tom Patterson and I became close friends. He would stop by on weekends, and we would fish in the creek below the bridge. Emily Carter, who had been so shaken by her accident, went on to become an advocate for rural infrastructure improvements. She even helped secure a grant to improve other private roads in the county. David Foster served as HOA president for 3 years before stepping down to spend more time with his grandchildren. His successor, a woman named Linda Ramirez, was equally reasonable and competent. The Brookfield Estates HOA transformed from a source of conflict into a model of community cooperation. As for the bridge, it stood strong through countless storms. Every time I crossed it, I felt a sense of pride. It was more than just wood and metal. It was a connection between the past and the present, between my family's history and the community's future. One winter evening, a few years after the whole ordeal, I was sitting on my porch watching the snow fall. My phone rang. It was Jim Henderson. Quincy, I have some news. The state is doing a feature on rural property rights and HOA overreach. They want to interview you about what happened. I do not know, Jim. That whole thing feels like ancient history now. It is important, Quincy. Other people are going through similar battles. Your story could help them. I thought about it. Maybe he was right. Maybe sharing what I had learned could prevent someone else from being bullied by an overreaching HOA. All right, I said. Set it up. The interview aired the following month. It was strange seeing myself on television, talking about property rights and standing up to unjust demands. But the response was overwhelming. I received letters and emails from people all over the state, thanking me for speaking out. One letter in particular stood out. It was from a man in southern Vermont who was facing a similar situation with his HOA. He wrote that my story had given him the courage to fight back, and he had successfully defended his property rights using some of the same legal strategies Jim Henderson had employed on my behalf. That letter made the whole uncomfortable experience of being on television worth it. As I sit here now, looking back on everything that happened, I realized that the most important lesson was not about property rights or legal battles. It was about community. When Sharon Newman tried to impose her will on me, she forgot that communities are built on mutual respect and cooperation. She saw the HOA as a tool for control rather than a mechanism for collaboration. And in the end, that attitude was her downfall. The bridge my grandfather built was meant to connect people, to provide access and opportunity. For a brief time, it became a symbol of division, but ultimately it fulfilled its original purpose. It brought people together, exposed wrongdoing, and reminded us all that our individual rights matter. I still live in my modest farmhouse at the end of Millstone Road. I still plow the road every winter, though now I have a newer truck with a better plow. The bridge stands strong, a testament to my grandfather's craftsmanship and to the importance of standing your ground when you are in the right. Every time I drive across it, I remember that morning when Sharon tried to tell me what I could and could not do on my own land. I remember the frustration, the anger, the determination to not be pushed around. But I also remember Tom Patterson showing up with a 6-pack of beer to apologize. I remember Emily Carter thanking me for saving her life. I remember David Foster reaching out to make things right. Those memories are what matter. Not the conflict, but the resolution. Not the division, but the unity that followed. The Brookfield Estates HOA learned an important lesson. Power without accountability leads to corruption. Rules without reason lead to resentment. And trying to control people who have every right to their independence leads to failure. As for me, I learned that sometimes standing your ground is the right thing to do, even when it is difficult, even when it makes you unpopular, even when it would be easier to just comply and keep the peace, because at the end of the day, principles matter, property rights matter, and refusing to be bullied matters. My grandfather built a bridge to connect our land to the world beyond. In defending that bridge and my right to maintain it on my own terms, I helped connect a community in ways that went far deeper than wood and metal. That is the real story. Not about a snowplow or an HOA or a legal battle. It is about what happens when people forget the basics of respect and cooperation, and what it takes to remind them the bridge still stands. The road still gets plowed every winter. And the community that once was divided is now stronger than ever. That is a legacy worth protecting. And as I sit on my porch on quiet winter evenings, watching the snow fall on the bridge my grandfather built, I know that I did the right thing. Not just for myself, but for everyone who believes that their property rights should be respected, that their generosity should not be taken advantage of, and that standing up to bullies, even ones with official titles and legal letterhead, is sometimes the most important thing you can do. The Brookfield Estates HOA tried to ban my snowplow from the private road, so I stopped clearing the bridge to their homes. And in doing so, I exposed corruption, protected my rights, and ultimately helped build a stronger, more respectful community. Sometimes the best way to move forward is to stand still and refuse to budge until others come to their senses. And sometimes an old bridge and a rusty snowplow are exactly the tools you need to make that stand.